Caterpillar is the most recognized name in heavy equipment on Earth. Their machines built highways, won wars, and reshaped continents. But the engineer behind many of the most radical breakthroughs in earth-moving history was not a Caterpillar engineer. He was a school dropout who quit at 14, gave away 90% of his income, and built machines that outperformed Caterpillar's by more than 2-to-1 in independent field tests. His name was R.G. LeTourneau, and the reason you have probably never heard of him reveals something uncomfortable about how industries really choose their winners. Robert Gilmore LeTourneau was born in 1888 in the small town of Richford, Vermont. He left formal schooling at just 14, setting out to earn his living as a farmhand and later as a laborer in San Francisco's iron foundries. The 1906 earthquake nearly took his life, but he walked away with a stubborn faith in second chances and an even stronger drive to learn. Without a degree, he taught himself mechanical engineering by correspondence, poring over technical manuals at night after long days on the shop floor. Letters from his early years describe nights spent sketching machine parts by lamplight, determined to find better ways to move Earth than anyone had before. By his early 30s, LeTourneau had launched his own earth-moving business with a used tractor, a borrowed scraper, and a $1,000 loan. The company grew quickly, fueled by his relentless tinkering and a hands-on approach that kept him close to the machines and the men who built them. He saw himself, as he later wrote, as just a mechanic whom the Lord has blessed. For LeTourneau, invention was a calling. He believed that putting faith before profit would lead to the right results, both in business and in life. That conviction shaped everything he did, from the way he managed his workforce to his decision to give away nearly 90% of his income to charity and Christian causes. He ran his company like a workshop, not a corporation. Research and development always came first. He personally reviewed every prototype, often working late to test new ideas. Board meeting records show that he resisted building a national sales force or dealer network, seeing those as distractions from the real work of invention. Profit sharing and philanthropy were central to his management style, and he often told employees, "God runs my business." This philosophy would shape not just his machines, but the very structure of his company, and would set him on a path that diverged sharply from the industry giants he competed against. Caterpillar's ascent began not with a single invention, but with the merger of the Holt Manufacturing Company and C.L. Best Tractor Company in 1925. This union created a company with national reach and a name that would soon become a byword for reliability. By the early 1930s, Caterpillar was already weaving its identity into the fabric of American industry. Memos from the era show a deliberate push to standardize the brand, yellow paint, bold block lettering, and the now iconic cat logo. Every machine, from the smallest grader to the largest crawler, wore the same uniform. The real engine behind Caterpillar's rise, though, was its dealer network. By the end of the 1930s, more than 1,200 authorized dealers stretched across the United States. Each was bound by a contract that required not just sales, but stocked parts, trained mechanics, and a promise of service within 48 hours. Dealers received detailed manuals and company-backed financing, ensuring that even remote projects could count on parts and support. Caterpillar's marketing was equally methodical. Print ads and radio spots painted the Cat machine as a symbol of American progress, dependable, rugged, and ever-present on the nation's biggest jobs. Internal documents from 1935 describe the brand as the backbone of modern construction. That message was repeated in newsreels and trade journals. This approach built more than sales. It built trust. Contractors learned that buying a Cat machine meant joining a system, one where downtime was minimized and help was never far away. As the Great Depression squeezed capital and public works surged, Caterpillar's web of dealers and standardized service became its greatest asset, creating a commercial moat that no rival could easily cross. Two fundamentally different philosophies shaped the fate of heavy equipment in America. On one side stood the engineer-inventor, obsessed with the technical frontier. On the other side stood the strategist, building a fortress of distribution, service, and brand. LeTourneau poured his energy into invention, convinced that a better machine would naturally find its place in the world. He saw engineering as a calling, not a commodity, and treated sales and marketing as distractions from the real work. Each prototype was a step toward something new, not just a product to be sold. Caterpillar, by contrast, treated the machine as only one piece of a much larger puzzle. The company's leadership understood that a contractor's decision to buy a bulldozer or scraper was shaped by more than horsepower or patent diagrams. What mattered was the promise of uptime, the certainty that a broken part could be replaced in days, not weeks. Caterpillar's vast dealer network, with its parts warehouses and trained mechanics, created a safety net that made switching brands expensive and risky. This is known as the switching cost effect. Once a contractor invested in the CAT system, every future decision tilted towards staying inside that network. The paradox becomes clear. LeTourneau's machines could outperform and outlast, but Caterpillar's system offered something just as valuable: predictability, support, and a brand that stood behind every sale. In the world of heavy equipment, adoption often follows the path of least resistance, not the path of greatest innovation. The stakes were never just about who built the better machine. They were about who could build the bigger ecosystem. As the industry matured, the balance between invention and distribution would set the terms for who shaped the future and who was left as a footnote. Rubber tires rolling across rough ground. LeTourneau's Super C tourniquet didn't just look different, it was different. While most competitors clung to steel tracks, LeTourneau bet everything on high-capacity, rubber-tired haulers and a drive system that belonged to the future. The Super C's 3-section carryall could be swapped out in under an hour, turning a 12-yard scraper into a 15-yard workhorse without leaving the job site. Operator manuals from the early 1950s describe a process so streamlined that a single crew could reconfigure the machine between morning and lunch, a flexibility unheard of in the industry at the time. Blueprints show the heart of LeTourneau's vision: the electric wheel drive. Instead of a traditional transmission, each wheel housed its own motor, delivering direct torque and allowing for precise control on soft or uneven terrain. Maintenance logs reveal that this modular approach didn't just boost power, it made repairs faster and field upgrades possible with minimal downtime. The Super C's design let contractors adapt to changing site conditions, scaling up or down as needed, an advantage that rigid, one-size-fits-all machines couldn't match. LeTourneau's machines weren't just bigger, they were smarter and more adaptable. The operator's seat was a cockpit for innovation, with levers and gauges designed for single-handed control. Every detail, from the cable-operated scraper to the quick-change carryall, reflected a belief that engineering should serve the people in the dirt, not just the people in the boardroom. In the world of earth-moving, LeTourneau wasn't just building machines. He was building possibilities. Operator logbooks from 1955 tell a story that numbers alone cannot ignore. In a side-by-side field trial, LeTourneau's Super C tourniquet and Caterpillar's D7 bulldozer faced the same job: move as much earth as possible in a 10-hour shift. The results were as clear as the dust clouds trailing each machine. The LeTourneau crew logged an average cycle time of just 45 seconds per load, compared to 78 seconds for the Caterpillar. Over the course of the day, the Super C moved about 2.1 times more material, roughly 1,800 cubic yards per hour, compared to the D7's 820. Fuel logs recorded a 15% savings for LeTourneau's design. even with a heavier payload. Independent observers from Contractor magazine, tasked with recording every pass and every refuel, noted that the electric wheel drive delivered smoother acceleration and less wheel slip on soft ground. The modular carry-all allowed the crew to swap out a damaged section in under an hour, keeping the machine working while the Caterpillar sat idle for repairs. Test crews, with no stake in either company, signed off on the day's tallies. More dirt moved, less fuel burned, and less time lost to breakdowns. By every measurable standard, speed, efficiency, adaptability, the LeTourneau machine set a new benchmark for productivity. But as the test logs closed, the question lingered. Would raw performance be enough to shape the industry's future? Or would other forces decide whose machines built the world? Oil rigs rising from the Gulf of Mexico in the 1950s owed their existence to a man better known for moving mountains of earth. After selling his earth-moving division in 1953, Robert Gilmore LeTourneau turned his attention offshore, signing a contract in November 1954 to build the world's first self-elevating jack-up drilling platform. The result was the Scorpion, a steel hull measuring 186 by 150 feet, with three 140-foot lattice legs designed to lift the entire structure above the waves. LeTourneau's rig didn't just float, it could walk. The Scorpion used electric motors and a gear-driven system to raise itself out of the water and then move across the seabed under its own power. This design allowed oil companies to reposition the platform for new wells without the need for massive cranes or tugboats. Engineering journals from the era described the Scorpion as a mobile fortress, able to drill in deeper water and harsher conditions than any rival rig. The Zapata Offshore Company, led by a young George H.W. Bush, bet $400,000 up front on LeTourneau's vision, with another $550,000 and stock shares promised if the rig performed. By December 1955, the Scorpion was drilling off the Mississippi coast, setting a new standard for offshore exploration. Within 15 years, more than half the world's jack-up rigs traced their lineage to LeTourneau's original design. While Caterpillar's name became synonymous with construction, LeTourneau's offshore pivot showed the reach of his engineering. His machines didn't just shape the land, they opened new frontiers at sea, expanding the very definition of what heavy equipment could do. Convoys of Caterpillar tractors rumbled across the headlines during World War II, their yellow paint and block letter logos stamped into newsreels and recruitment posters. Army procurement files from 1942 list thousands of Cat bulldozers and motor graders shipped to the European and Pacific fronts. These machines became as familiar to the public as the soldiers themselves. The military's reliance on Caterpillar was no accident. The company's ability to deliver standardized equipment, backed by a sprawling parts and service network, made it the go-to supplier for urgent wartime projects. Newsreel narrators called Cat bulldozers the backbone of battlefield engineering, reinforcing a brand image that would outlast the war itself. Yet behind the front lines, the story was more complicated. The 1,500-mile Alaska Highway, one of the largest engineering feats of the war, was built with a fleet dominated by LeTourneau's high-capacity scrapers and tournipoles. Quartermaster records show that nearly three-quarters of the Allied earth-moving equipment in the early war years came from LeTourneau's factories. But while Caterpillar's machines appeared in dramatic footage clearing bombed-out roads or pushing through jungle, LeTourneau's contributions were chronicled in technical journals and after-action reports, rarely making it into the public eye. The contrast was stark. Caterpillar's presence on the front lines became a symbol of American might, while LeTourneau's innovations powered the logistics behind the scenes. Wartime procurement didn't just move dirt, it amplified brands, shaping which names would be remembered long after the shooting stopped. A contractor staring down a deadline faces a choice that is rarely about horsepower. It is about risk, specifically the risk of a machine sitting idle while crews wait for a replacement part. Dealer manuals from the 1950s spell out the difference. Caterpillar promised critical parts delivery within 48 hours, no matter how remote the job site. For a LeTourneau machine, the same part could take 2 weeks or more, often shipped from a single regional depot. Cost studies from the era put the price of downtime in sharp relief. A stalled scraper could bleed $12,000 a day in lost productivity, wages, and equipment rental. The same breakdown on a Caterpillar meant a much smaller hit, about $3,500 per day, because the dealer network kept machines running. For buyers, these numbers were not just theoretical. They shaped every capital decision, pushing contractors toward brands that minimized uncertainty. The result was a service moat. Once inside the Caterpillar ecosystem, leaving it meant gambling with time and money that most could not afford to lose. That lead time gap, measured in days and dollars, became as important as any technical spec in the manual. In 1953, Robert Gilmore LeTourneau made a decision that would define the limits of invention in a market ruled by scale. The sale of his entire earth-moving division to Westinghouse Air Brake Company for a reported $31 million was more than a windfall. It was a surrender of control over the machines that bore his name. The deal handed Wabco not just patents and blueprints, but the production lines for the Super C Tourneau and the electric wheel drive, the very heart of LeTourneau's engineering legacy. Contracts from the transaction laid out the terms. Wabco acquired the earth-moving product line, existing orders, and the rights to further develop LeTourneau's designs. In exchange, LeTourneau secured the capital needed to pursue new projects, most notably his foray into offshore drilling platforms. Yet the trade-off was stark. With the stroke of a pen, the inventor who had set the pace in earth-moving innovation ceded the commercial battlefield to competitors like Caterpillar. The machines that once carried his signature would now wear another company's badge, and his influence on the construction industry would depend on the willingness of others to carry his ideas forward. The $31 million sale solved the immediate problem of financing, but it locked in a legacy shaped more by technical vision than by market dominance. Patent records tell a story that outlasts any logo. LeTourneau's electric wheel drive, first patented in 1951, is cited by 44 later patents, an unbroken chain linking his original hub motor design to today's in-wheel drives used by Komatsu, Volvo, and even Caterpillar's electric excavators. Each citation is a technical fingerprint, proof that the core idea, placing the motor inside the wheel for direct torque and modular repair, remains foundational in modern heavy equipment. The original patent, U.S. Patent 2726726A, describes a housing that serves as both axle and motor, a concept that has survived 6 decades of redesign and competition. Even as the LeTourneau name faded from the sides of machines, the invention itself refused to disappear. The engineering endures, quietly shaping the drivetrain blueprints of the 21st century, long after the brand that launched it was sold and rebranded. Inside LeTourneau's factories, the rules were different. The company's culture revolved around experimentation and adaptability. Workers were expected to solve problems on the fly, sometimes fabricating replacement parts right on the job site rather than waiting for a shipment. Company records from the 1940s describe a workforce empowered to suggest improvements, with machinists and engineers collaborating side by side. LeTourneau introduced a profit-sharing scheme that paid quarterly bonuses based on company performance, a rare practice in American manufacturing at the time. This approach fostered loyalty and encouraged risk-taking, with employees sharing in the rewards of each breakthrough. The atmosphere was less about hierarchy and more about shared purpose. Everyone was invested in making the next machine better than the last. While competitors focused on scaling up production lines, LeTourneau's team focused on making every project an opportunity to invent, refine, and adapt. The story of LeTourneau and Caterpillar is not unique. Across industries, technical brilliance has often lost out to stronger distribution, marketing, or service. In the home video market, Sony's Betamax offered sharper images and better sound, but VHS swept the world by making it easier for manufacturers and retailers to join its side. By the late 1980s, VHS controlled over 80% of the global market, while Betamax faded into obscurity. The same pattern played out in the battle over electrical systems. Edison's direct current was reliable and safe, but Westinghouse's alternating current, championed by Tesla, could travel farther, and a broader network of backers helped it become the global standard. These stories repeat a simple lesson. The market rarely crowns the boldest engineer. Instead, it rewards those who build the widest bridges between invention and everyday use, turning technical advantage into something people can actually buy, repair, and trust. Today, the machines that move the world still carry the DNA of LeTourneau's radical ideas, even as Caterpillar's brand dominates the skyline. The paradox endures. Market power rewards strategy, not always vision. As industries chase scale and recognition, the lesson is clear. Sometimes the greatest innovators remain in the shadows, shaping the future while others claim the spotlight. Whose legacy truly matters most? Let me know your thoughts in the comments.